Hi guys, my name is Antonio Seri. In this tutorial, we will make a 3D logo with flying glass effect. As you can see, this material has a very photorealistic, and create interesting effects of reflection, in the animation. This material can also be used for simple animations, but the result will be exceptional. Proceed with opening the file 3D Flying Logo Glass Effect in Adobe Illustrator. This file has been designed and structured to make the import work in 3D software as easy as possible. I added two very important guides that will serve to align the vector project in the center of the three-dimensional space. I also divided and grouped layers, differentiated by color and value of extrusion. This will make it easier to follow the project. We export the project in Adobe Illustrator 8. We open the rulers with the command R, drag in the upper left corner at the point where you cross the two guides. So we set the 0. In this way, we did match our guides made in Illustrator with those of our 3D program. We open Cinema 4D and import the Adobe Illustrator file with Files, Merge Object. Click OK. We rotate our object in the P rotation coordinates to -90. Copy the value of the Y coordinate and paste it in the Z coordinate. Now reposition the pivot of our object in the center of the scene. Go to Move Tool Pivot, and place 0 value in all the coordinates, for place the pivot at center scene. Now we can change the Y coordinate, with value 65. This is because our object is not resting on the floor, but is suspended, in order to get softer shadows and caustics. We create three materials that will serve as a reference color. The first is cyan, the second is blue, and finally, the third is yellow. The first layer Cyan 16 of file Adobe Illustrator corresponds to 20 layer on Cinema 4D. I will tell you a trick. Drag the cyan material in the 20 layer, holding down the Alt key, while apply the Extrude tool. The tool will be applied in the selected layer. Check Hierarchical, and enter the value (16). Fillet caps, only at the end, with the value in step 6, and radius 2. Rename this layer as Extrude Cyan 16. Repeat the last step on all layers, following the scheme image, and enter the color and the value of extrusion. Let's create the layer Extrude Cyan 39. Duplicate the layer Extrude Cyan 16, duly created, delete the layer and drag inside the layer 19. Rename Extrude Cyan 39. Change the extrude value from (16) to (39). Repeat this step for the layer Cyan 60. Let's create the layer Extrude Blue 16. Duplicate the layer Extrude Cyan 16, duly created, delete the layer and drag inside the layer 17. Rename Extrude Blue 16. Replace the cyan material with blue material. Repeat this step for the layer Blue 60. Duplicate the layer Cyan 39 and drag inside the layer 15. Rename Extrude Yellow 39. Replace the cyan material with yellow material. We select all the extrude layers created, and groups them in a null object. Rename to Ambient Glass. We continue with the cubes that make up the mosaic logo. Select the 14 layer, taking the Alt key pressed, apply the Extrude tool. We apply the value to 7, and check hierarchical. We apply fillet cup on end, step to 6. Radius to 0.85. Apply the blue material. And rename it 10 Blue 7. To view our mosaic logo in foreground, select the layer 2, 4 and 5, and press S. Change the value extrusion less 7. Duplicate the layer 10 Blue 7, delete the layer inside it, drag the 13 layer, and renamed as 09 Blue 7. Duplicate this level, delete the layer and drag inside 12 layer. Renamed 08 Cyan 6.5. Replace the cyan material with blue material. Well, in the mosaic logo, missing 2 tracks and a symbol. We import from our Illustrator file. Drag the 7 layer above the 8 layer. The 5 layer above the 10 layer. And finally the plus layer above the 2 layer. Okay, now we have all the tracks. We continue our process of extrusion, following the scheme and repeating the above steps. We select all the extrusions that make up the mosaic logo, and groups them in a null object. With the command Alt-G. Finally, rename logo mosaic. Turn off the visibility of the logo mosaic, and apply the Extrude on Logo CG Full. Activate Hierarchical, depth less 16. Fillet caps to end, with value step to 6, radius, 2. Check the constraint. Rename Logo CG Full. And apply the cyan material. Duplicate the last layer, delete the layer on the inside, and drag the plus symbol on it. Disable constraint. Rename plus 16. Replace the material with the yellow material. We change the fillet cap's radius to 0.85. Finally, duplicate this last extrude layer, and drag the 2 layer inside. Activate constraint, and change the value to less 7. Replace the yellow material with blue material. Rename text HUD 7. Write 16 in the layer Logo CG Full. OK, now we can delete the layer 1. We select all the layers of modeling and drag them outside the null object. Delete 3D Flying Logo Glass effect. As you can see, we modeled all elements of our scene. In the next steps, we will proceed with the inclusion of the camera animation. We insert the camera, extend the timeline from 90 to 104 frames. In the coordinates panel, insert the following values: x, 370, y, 525, z, less 495, h 28.9 degrees, p rotation, less 50.5 degrees, b, 0. Activate the view from the camera, by cameras, scene cameras, camera. Activate the first keyframe. Let's move the timeline in 12 frame, and insert the values, x, 342.5, y, 174.5, z, less 311. Activate the keyframe. Let's move to 104 frame, and insert value, x, 381, y, 266, z, less 381, and activate the keyframe. See the animation. The animation is not a linear movement. To make it linear, click on the right mouse button, on the path of the camera, and open the F-Curves panel. We select all the graphic lines, with Command A, and select with the right button, type of curve, linear. Now the animation of the camera is linear. OK. Perfect. Now, insert a plan, and in the Object panel, insert width and height value to 2000. Rename floor. Activate Logo CG Full Visibility. Select the layer Logo CG Full, Logo Mosaic and Ambient Glass, apply the tag Display. This tag will allow us to apply the opacity of objects in the scene. We select Tag Display Logo Mosaic, activate the visibility and apply a keyframe with value 0. Let's move the timeline to 23 frame, apply a keyframe with value 100. Click on the tag display of the layer Ambient Glass. Let's move the timeline in 11 frame. and activate a keyframe with visibility value to 100. Let's go to 12 frame and give visibility to 0. This step is for getting rid of ambient glass from the scene in the second part of the animation. Back in the 12 frame, we click on the tag display of the logo CG Full and activate a keyframe with visibility value 100. Let's move the timeline in 57 frame and activate visibility with value 0. View the render. We can see the tag visibility effect during the animation. Turn off the visibility of the logo CG Full and proceed with the animation of the extrusion of the cubes that make up the mosaic logo. The layer 01 Cyan 12 and 06 Cyan 9 are without animation. Select the 02 Cyan 7 layer. Go to the timeline to 0 frame and apply the first keyframe on movement, the default value ~7. Let's move the timeline in 23 frame, change the value from ~7 to ~17, activate the keyframe. Let's move the timeline to 104 frame and restore the value ~7, activate the keyframe. We see the animation. We applied the animation with vertical extrusion movement. Select the 03 Blue 3.5 layer and apply the first keyframe on movement, value ~3.5. Let's move the timeline in 23 frame, change the value to ~20, activate the keyframe. Let's move the timeline to 104 frame, value ~3.5, activate the keyframe. Select the 04 Blue 3 and apply the keyframe, value ~3.5. Let's move the timeline in 23 frame, change the value from ~3.5 to ~20. Let's move the timeline to 104 frame, value ~3.5, activate the keyframe. Select the 05 Cyan 12 layer, go to the timeline to 0 frame, and apply the keyframe, value ~12. Let's move the timeline in 23 frame, change the value to ~33. Finally, let's move the timeline to 104 frame, value ~12. Select the 07 Cyan layer, and apply the keyframe, value to ~1.5. Let's move the timeline in 23 frame, change the value to ~35. Let's move the timeline to 104 frame, return value to ~1.5. Select the 08 Cyan layer, go to the timeline to 0 frame, and apply the keyframe. Let's move the timeline in 23 frame, change the value to ~41. Let's move the timeline to 104 frame, return value to ~6.5. Activate the keyframe. Select the 09 Blue 7 layer, go to the timeline to 0 frame, and apply the keyframe. Let's move timeline in 23 frame, change the value to ~25. Finally, let's move the timeline to 104 frame, return value to ~7. Select the 10 Blue 7 layer, go to the timeline to 0 frame, and apply the keyframe on movement. Let's move the timeline in 23 frame, change the value to ~40. Let's move the timeline to 104 frame, return value to ~7. Activate the keyframe. View the animation. To make the effect more interesting, in 04 Blue layer, move the frames from 10 to 33. And, in the 02 Cyan 7 layer, from 7 to 30. Okay, very well. Now let's create the materials that make this unique project. Insert the first material, a shader. From Load Material Preset, Cinema 4D, Materials, Banji, Glass 1. In the Basic panel, rename our material Blue Glass. In Diffuse panel, change the first color with the following values, 23, 85, 193. The second color with the following values, 136, 191, 255. Modify surface illumination from 90 to 100. Go to Specular 1 panel, change the color from white to 188, 233. In Specular 2 panel, we change the color from white to 137, 195. Specular 3 panel, we insert a white color. In the transparency panel, change the value back opacity to 20, edge to 40 and refraction index to 4. In reflection panel, we insert the values 250, 260, 150, 350. Edit the first color with the following values 0, 45, 219. The second color with 120, 281, 255. The esoteric panel by default. In Specular 2, change the value of intensity from 20 to 60. In Basic panel, turn off color, and activate reflection and transparency. Rename this material, cyan glass. Go to the transparency panel, and insert a gray at 192. Modify refraction to 1.52. Go to reflection panel and insert the following values 150, 211, 255. Lower the brightness from 100 to 90. And activate additive. Let's go to specular panel and enter values 82, 100, less 17, and 4. The illumination panel is by default. Duplicate the material just created, and rename yellow glass. Change color only the reflection panel to 230, 216, and 56. And the brightness from 90 to 100. Replace the yellow material, just created, to the existing. Drag it over it by pressing the Alt key. Also, replace the blue glass material. With this simple step, we included all the materials in our scene. Insert a new material, change the color from gray to white. And rename floor. And apply it on plane. Insert the latest material, rename map reflection. In the basic panel, activate only luminance. Let's go to the luminance panel and load the image, map reflection JPG. We set the brightness from 100 to 500, mix mode to multiply, and mix strength to 35. OK, this material will be applied on a reflective sphere. Insert a sphere. In the panel, modify the object radius to 1400 meters. The sphere surrounding the scene, as we can see, has the function of the sky. We change the coordinates with the following values, x2, y less 8, z less 2. Global scale to 0.643. And the rotation h at 40 degrees. Apply reflection map material on the sphere. View the result. Add a tag compositing to the sphere. Disable Scene by GI. Activate the visibility of the logo CG Full, and try to do the rendering. The result of the material glass is very brilliant, and should be adjusted with the addition of lights. Enter the first light with the following coordinates, x 556, y 665. In the general panel, change the intensity value from 100 to 70, and activate shadow maps. Rename this light to Light A. Add a second light and rename Light B. Modify intensity from 100 to 30 and activate area. In the coordinates panel, insert x less 225 and y 367. Make a render to view the result. As you can see, the lights on have changed the overall result, improving the reflexes. To improve the shadows, we must raise the floor Y to 55. View the final render. Very cool. We go to the render settings. We set all frames. Anti-aliasing to best, still images, and activate caustics, and check volume caustics. The rendering times are very long. At the end, we will get this result. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Follow also on my website crrntn.com, where you will also find other materials for Cinema 4D and more on sale, in the shop section. Have fun. Bye, and at next, by Antonio Seri.